And now I'd like to ask Rabbi Norman Solomon from Newby's Box to respond to this.
Thank you. I shall jump straight into what I have written without any introduction, and listening to both, so this is an introduction if you like, I'm going to tread on a few toes, but I suppose that's what we're here for. So first of all, I warmly welcome Dr. Sahin's clear analysis of the difficulties facing Muslims within the new global order dominated by Western liberal culture. And I strongly endorse his call for dialogue rather than confrontation. Frequently, as he was speaking, as I read his excellent paper, I felt that I could substitute Jew for Muslim and Jewish for Islamic without compromising the discourse. So close have our experiences been. But in my response, I shall focus on areas where I feel there's room for further discussion, rather than on those in which we would find ourselves in complete agreement. Dr. Sahin distinguished between secularity and secularism. I won't enter into the terminological question of what we should refer to as programmatic secularism rather than secularity. Let us stick to the usage which he has suggested, which is secularity, by which he understands the impartiality of government with regard to the religious faith of its citizens, may, he says, be compatible with Islamic values, but secularism, which he defines as an ideological position that confines faith strictly to the personal sphere of life, is, he maintains, inherently incompatible with Islam. Now, I want to consider in more detail exactly what's meant when we describe Britain as a secular state. By the term, I will understand, as Dr. Sahin does, a state whose administration is impartial as to the religious faith of its citizens. That is, its laws apply without discrimination to people of all religions, and no privileges are granted or withheld by the law on the grounds of religion. Of course, a state should not discriminate on grounds of colour, race or gender either, but I don't think that's anything to do with being secular. But on this sort of definition, Britain is not quite a secular state. It's been suggested that it has a vestige of its religious heritage, but I think there's much more than that. We have an established church, and some of the officials of the church, the monarch and some bishops, are ex officio part of the legislature. The Church of England, moreover, is assumed as a sort of default religious affiliation of citizens, at least in England. Its cathedrals and churches dominate the landscape. Its festivals, Christmas and Easter, perhaps to a lesser extent Whitsun, embellish the calendar. Laws on marriage, blasphemy, and Sunday rest, attenuated as they may be, derive from Christian doctrines. Charity law privileges the advancement of religion, though in fact not specifically of Anglicanism or of Christianity in general. And Christian culture informs the national character. These are all public matters, so it's by no means the case that religion in Britain has been confined to the private sector. Some of this might be changed. The Anglican Church could be disestablished, though I think it ought to be, but our present Chief Rabbi and his predecessor, as well as a lot of Muslim leaders, have defended the established church on what seem to me the spurious grounds that having an official state church raises the profile of religion in society, and that is good for all religions. But whether or not that's true, I think that the automatic appointment of Anglican bishops to the legislature should be dropped. Individual bishops who've made valuable contributions to public debate can still be appointed or elected if an elected chamber is decided upon, just as leaders of other faiths have occasionally been appointed. Religious views to be considered by the administration. Religious bodies and individuals, after all, have as much right as others to expect their views to be heard. I envisage only two limitations, which I think won't be shared entirely by Nick. First one, well, they should not be specially privileged over other groups and individuals. And the second one, which is admittedly more debatable, is that cases should be argued on a humanitarian, ethical and scientific, rather than a doctrinal basis. For instance, opponents of early abortion should be expected to produce scientific evidence to persuade others that an embryo is as fully developed a human being as its mother, and therefore entitled to equal protection, rather than arguing on doctrinal premises or on the basis of scripture, halakha, or sharia. It so happens that Jewish and Islamic views on abortion are closely similar, though they are very different from those of Roman Catholics. There are other matters in which we may differ from each other, or even among ourselves. Governments need to be aware of such differences. My experience in the Jewish community is that there have often been arguments as to who should represent Jews to the government. And there are certainly the same sort of disputes among Muslims. Jews tend to think that they must always speak with a united voice. And I do hear Muslims who think that Muslims should also always speak with a united voice. I think this is a mistake. We should not be afraid to admit that there are many kinds of Jews, many kinds of Muslims. No one Jew or Muslim can speak for all of his or her co-religionists. Moreover, there's always the danger with ideologically motivated groups or individuals that it's the most strident who are heard and who are wrongly thought of as representative of the communities to which they belong. We have to make sure that our silent majorities are heard too. Now I come to a more profound issue, of which I don't have any clear conclusion, so I shall state the case without even endorsing it 100%. Dr. Sahin wrote, a major external dynamic influence in contemporary Muslim self-understanding is what was once known as the struggle between Islamdom and Christendom, which, after a profound secularization process, has come to be termed as the Islam-West conflict. He seems to be uncomfortable with this characterization himself, and with good cause, because the notion of a systematic confrontation between East and West, or between Islam and Christendom, is misleading and damaging. True that many Islamic countries have only recently emerged from a period of domination by the West. But if we take a longer view of history,